Philosophers talk to our times, towards an ethnography of a self-poisoning mind. The elaborate construction of choice and the way that capitalism gives it its space and its time is, of course, for the last, 250 years, I suppose? Jane Austen's time, so London in the early 1800s, but probably begun about 1780 with the beginning of drapery shops, has become a poison in whose corrosive influence we pattern the way we understand our minds, but also our thoughts. But let me explain. What I'm really worrying at here is choice, and the way that we understand the idea of freedom. We live in a free society, but what do we really mean by we live in a free society? It is, I would think, that we have an asymmetric, I mean totally, we have two axes for understanding choice, let's put it this way. We have a very spatial aspect, or we have a very and totally different temporal aspect, and the two never meet. And we are caught because most choices cannot be understood this way. Most difficult choices in the world we live don't actually amount to choice as we understand it, and so cannot be caught within the axis of freedom as we understand it. I mean, deeming global warming is a classic example. It's just got to be done. But then, let me explain, or try to explain. If you think about the way you are taught to make choices, we have two ways we understand choice. One is very, very much the structuralist model. It's very much the model based on space, somehow atemporal. You go into a supermarket and your choices is between a million different varieties of yogurt, with glitzy wrapping and endless promises, all with their unique number. I mean, they'll tell you something about themselves, that they're luxurious and unctuous, or they'll tell you something about themselves, that they're cheap, or they'll tell you something about themselves, they contain no fat, only cancer-causing sugars that will make you hungrier. But they don't add that last bit. And anyway, they're all owned by the same company, so it doesn't really matter. But that's not, of course, how the choice presents itself. Of course not. It presents itself as a welter of possibility. And you, the privileged chooser, can match that variety of creme fraiche to the individual need of you, understood numerically, understood in terms of a certain net, patterned no doubt by advertising, by a sequence of fears, by an idea of claim, by an image about who and what you are. Choice then becomes dissolved into semiotics. You are decoding the semiotics of the yogurt aisle, working out which one says what and how, and this set of contrasting elements which you are going to use to make yourself, to understand who and what you can be. And the supermarket choice has become the dominant way we understand choice. Political parties become then just a symbol on a piece of paper. You don't even need to read the name, you just have to be able to see the rows and vote. So that it all becomes resolved to a very simple, very spatial act, where they're all laid out before you, and you go, well, I'll have that one there then. Like a raffle ticket, or a game of bingo. And in doing this, of course, so much is hidden. I've already made sarky comments, because I always would, about the false choices of supermarkets, where you're being told that these things are low in sugar, and they forget to add they're high in cancer and will make you hungrier. Where these things are low in fat, or high in flavour, and the rest. The kind of algebra where you are choosing between products that claim to be healthy but probably aren't, and the real deal, is only possible on the supermarket shelf. It's only possible because you have that welter of choices. if you like, the welter of choices allows for the possibility of lying. More than that, it allows for that corporatization of the world that is undermining companies, but also undermining trust. I mean that once everything is understood in terms of bean counting and not in terms of product, then what you are doing is you are using the illusion of choice in order to pretend that things haven't changed at all, as you strip out dairy milk and replace it with palm oil and the rest, make it take some wax and the rest. But knowing that on the supermarket shelf, the choice will look the same and everybody will assume that it is the same. Likewise, that illusion of choice with its false, I'm going to sound terribly Heideggian, levelling down of different possibilities allows you to disguise all kinds of nonsense in politics. The obvious answer, if you're British and my age, is to go back 10 years, where the British were offered a choice between Brexit or not Brexit. As if it was a real choice. As if these were two alternatives. And yet one side was constantly lying and was clearly a power grab by the very wealthy. Because the EU, for all its many sins, made the very wealthy's life a little bit more difficult by making them conform to certain rules and certain bureaucracies, all the more now. And on the other side, there was a slightly boring status quo that told lies, but not nearly as many, and often tried to tell the truth. The argument then wasn't between two equal parties. It was between one who was most always lying and one who was sometimes lying. It was one between one who is using racism to hide a coup by the very wealthy, who wish to guard their gold. And the other side, who just assumed that they would be voted in because they were the status quo. But because it resolved to a single tick upon a piece of paper, it created a total false equality. A false equality that made the choice seem genuine, when really there was no choice at all. Brexit was clearly always a very, very stupid idea. And all the glitz and all the glamour and all the racism wasn't going to make it any better. Understood properly, there was no choice. But of course it had to be resolved into the supermarket image. That this one or that one. You choose this one or that one. More than that, as one makes one's choice in the supermarket when nobody condemns you, not really. You're always just choosing between the glitz and the glamour. Everything becomes then equalised, including all the value judgments. You're not going to be condemned for choosing that particular chocolate bar, or at least probably not, unless you've got a political friend who will point out they've all been manufactured by slavery anyway, or most of them. And so, we understand choice in terms of spatially laid out coordinates between individual signs, individual symbols, all that are locked in certain sets of grids, kind of semiotics. Now, the alienness of this, I think, cannot be overemphasised. I am certainly no essentialist, so I won't go, oh, this is totally unique within all of humanity, our brains just aren't up to it. But I'll let you do that for yourself. All I will say is, I don't think, perhaps in ancient Rome for a little bit, when you were choosing exactly where you ate, but by and large, most of the time humans didn't understand what it was to be free in this way at all. There is nothing natural about this, nothing given, nothing self-evident. And yet we think of it as such. More than that, we think of it as the only way to make a choice between different things. And the world of Spinoza, where predestination was the norm, is lost to us. We make choices. The supermarket tells us that much. But of course there's a second way we do judge, which is a totally different axis, far more Heideggian again. And that of course is the temporal axis. You might not be judged for the choices you made in the supermarket aisle at the moment, caught in the lattice work of possibilities. But you carry on choosing the one that makes you fatter, people will certainly judge you. More than that, we have over the long term images of what bodies should look like. And if you don't conform, we'll judge you. More than that, if you are a political party and your policies don't immediately work in a time frame that can be very, very arbitrary, we'll judge you for that too. So we make temporal judgments all the time. And yet these temporal judgments don't see the world in terms of a set of choices that were all equalised. It barely sees it in terms of choice at all. It sees it in terms of outcome. Outcome that is put against some sort of ideal. And the choices then are not choices that you ever made. Rather, they become a way, a name, a jargon for being able to condemn you for being like that now. And so, people with hormonal imbalances get condemned for eating too much. Or people who've made choices that they felt they could not make any other way at the time get condemned by history as somehow letting in the dark, gambling when one should not gamble. Time then becomes an access for condemning the choices that have been made, holding them up against an impossible standard, never seeing them for what they are, the difficult choices made in the press of the world, when actually there are no perfect choices, when things are not all laid out, one with the other, when you're always making compromises, always negotiating, always caught up in a world that is less than perfect. How could it be otherwise? But across time, as you forget all the other things that were, of course it all becomes so much more simple to judge and to condemn. And so we get caught up in this double axis, a temporal axis, where choices can be assessed in the abstract. In the abstract, I probably mean on the gross, not in the individual act, not in the individual moment, but how they actually, what then happened. And they can be judged against a perfection that is impossible. Versus the temporal, versus the spatial choice, where choice is made between an awful lot of very equal opportunities, and all you have to do is map out your desire, your style, your function. It becomes a matter of taste, personal, and personal identity. It doesn't seem to have any reality beyond a spatial choice, a lattice work of possibilities. And yet, of course, for all capitalism, and these are two of the great features of what I would call capitalism, I suppose. I don't like neoliberalism because it's really just capitalism. These features of capitalism are very bad ways for understanding actually the kind of choices that we do make in the world. Choices that are not really between two different alternatives, but rather between understanding what actually is happening. And once you understand, the choice is usually quite clear. Being caught upon the horns upon a dilemma is, as Spinoza says, as much about not knowing the way the world is and how it will pan out, actually understanding what is going on, as it is any real choice between equals. It doesn't work that way, because the choices are never equal. It isn't, and if you think they are, it is because somebody is manipulating that choice to give you an illusion of freedom, to make you choose between options that are probably very, very similar. Actual choice is difficult. It involves understanding. It certainly involves time. It cannot be made in the supermarket aisle, but has to be thought through. Thought through on a limited but real time frame. Limited because the choice, if you don't make it, will make itself. So, a time frame in which you have to think about various different options, in which you have to understand your very failure to understand everything that could happen, and how that is actually part of the choice, part of how you have to go with however you make it. All the great choices of my life were like that. It wasn't choices between equals. Choosing to live in France, which I did choose to do, kind of, was also only a kind of a choice. It was a given where we are and what is happening now, given the way I think politics will work out sort of choice. It didn't feel like a choice between equals, but a far more agonizing and difficult dialogue with what I thought the world could and would be, and where I would be and could be and within it. Choice is very badly understood spatially. and even worse understood temporally, where it is all far too simple. And yet, as we understand the world that way, as capitalism teaches us that is the way to understand choice, we become caught in the illusion of our own power, that we can actually choose between these different equals, and so unable, ironically, to act at all.